Hope everyone's doing well. Welcome to the MAGIA Mindset. Today's guest is a former professional player who is originally from New York. Currently, he resides in Tokyo, Japan, one of the most decorated grassroots coaches in Asia. Has written the book, Soccer Starts at Home. Has also presented to organizations such as FIFA, UEFA, Ajax in Amsterdam, Tottenham Hotspurs, Manchester United. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce Tom Byer. Roll the intro. Thank you so much, Tom, I know it's busy, especially you're on the other side in Japan. And I know it's difficult times in every continent during these unique 2020 year. And I appreciate you putting in the time to come in on our podcast.
Yeah, no, thank you for inviting me. I'm never shy to or at a loss for any words to talk about football. So no problem.
Fantastic. Tom, I think one of the most fascinating things about you as an individual is you've played at a high level and you've coached at a good level as well, is the way you've changed the youth game, the grassroots, your approach. I think everyone has become aware of you and the way you've impacted it. I want to kind of start the dialogue with US grassroots versus Japan grassroots, where you're at currently. The differences. What is it that's maybe US needs to still improve on? What is it that Japan's doing well and they're on the rise? If we can discuss that and dissect it, would be appreciated.
Yeah, sure. Well, whenever you try to compare any country's program to another country, the first thing that conjures up in my mind is one big word, and that's culture. So, there's 211 member association countries that are in FIFA. And out of that 211, only 8 have ever won a World Cup tournament. And if you look at what happens around the world, which countries dominate, there's really only a handful, or what I call serial repeat winners. So if we go with the comparison first, the US and the Japan are quite similar because they're not huge players yet in the game, right? But when you look at, and again, I'm living in Japan for, it's coming up, I guess it's 36 years or more, right? Most of my adult life has been here.
Wow.
But when I look at the big stark difference between what's happening in Japan and America is that Japan, in sports in general, not just football or soccer as we call it, but in sports in general, here in Japan, it's a full-time pursuit. There's no on and there's no off season here. You play 52 weeks a year. And once you join a team, it's more of a specialization. There's a lot of hot topic discussions about specialization. But that's the really biggest thing. And the culture accepts the fact that when a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old joins a team here in Japan, that they're going to train 3 to 4 times a week for 2 to 3 hours a training session, and that's going to go 52 weeks a year. So that's a lot of practice. So that's a big commitment. And I can't help but think and say to people that, if you did that with a 6-year-old in America, they might come with the paddy wagon and throw you in jail, right? So these are, when you look at certain countries, there's cultures in place that are very conducive to developing players. And Japan it tends to be one of those because of the amount of practice and time. Our sport is a sport that unfortunately takes a ridiculous amount of practice to become good at it. So unless you really start early and you're really committed to playing, it's really difficult to become a top player. Now, if you look at, on the worldwide scale, I mean, we can talk to both the men's game and the women's game. But I think the women's game is quite interesting because Japan is a World Cup champion on the women's side. And not just that, but it's the only country in the world, including even America, that's won all three FIFA World Cup tournaments. They won the World Cup in 2011. They've won the Under-17 World Cup, and they won the Under-20 World Cup. And the reason I point that out is it's quite remarkable because there's only 50,000 registered players, women players here in this country, where in America we have millions. So, I mean, that's the starting point for me, at least. We've got an enormous amount of players that are playing top flight football in Europe from Japan. So, I believe that when you really compare on the men's side, there's no doubt about it. We develop better technical players here. There's no doubt about it.
In Japan.
Yeah, in Japan. There's no doubt about it. But here's an interesting thing, and I say a lot of people, is that we develop better technical players, but I believe that the coaching overall is much better in the United States than it is here. So some people might scratch their head and say, well, isn't that a contradiction? Well, it isn't, because technical skills are rarely the result of coaches. It's got much more to do with the culture piece. How much kids practice? How much do they train? What do they practice? How do they train? But the coaching is not comparable, especially even if you compare it to the elite side. America's got some great coaches. So I always say to people, and I do a lot of consulting around the world for development, is that everybody seems to think that it's a coaching problem. We need more coaches. We need more coaches' education. We need more facilities. We need a national, curriculum. We need some DNA. No, the reality is that many countries get the culture piece wrong, and a strategy in the absence of culture, it doesn't get you too far. So that's kind of preliminary how I look at the game.
No, I mean, that's fascinating. And I totally agree with that. It's so funny how you're establishing on Japan's culture, very resemblant to South Korea. They're and China as well, if you look at Olympics, any sports they do, the practice, the diligence behind it, amount of the hours they put, they are hard believers of that. Where you end up comparing it to a Brazil, they like their development through games, through futsal, foot volley. It's all about the joy. If you make mistakes, it's culture. They're feeling it. But in Japan, I'm pretty firm if a parent sees a child make a mistake, they're coming down hard. Doesn't matter what age. It's always the pursuit of perfection in their eyes. And I want to kind of transition into the topic how we touched on great coaching is in America. What is the role in the grassroots, especially in the grassroots? And I think that's such a vital area, because that's where all the great stuff happen, and to map that journey to get to where they need to get to, the players. How vital is the parents' role, the household, the home environment we create? And I know you've had some webinars, great webinars, in it starts at home, because there's so much a coach can do. And we know that there's X amount of hours we get our hands on the player, but there's X amount of hours that the parents get it. And we know the great coaches are in America, but how vital is the home environment that American parents need to create? And what is it that in Japan, what kind of home environments have you seen created out there that is beneficial, but also needs improvement on?
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head. And that's my whole mantra nowadays, is that it all starts at home. And so when I wrote the book, actually, Football or Soccer Starts at Home, I've done tons of research, a lot of hands-on experience myself. I mean, I've spent an entire career in the grassroots market segment, right? So I know I can compare things, right? So there's no doubt about it that the home plays the biggest role, because here's kind of the formula. A kid who crosses over the line into organized play, which is usually around 6 years of age, first grade in most countries in the world, if that player is comfortable with the ball at their feet, if they're competent with the ball at their feet, if they're confident as soon as they get dropped off for their first ever training practice, that's a game changer. Even paired with the inexperienced parent volunteer coach, that kid usually develops. It's the child who crosses over that line into organized play, and they have no proficiency, no competency, no confidence with the ball. Even paired with the experienced coach, normally that kid doesn't develop. And it reflects in the numbers. If you look at America, according to the Aspen Institute of Sport, which does a lot of research, 38.5% of American kids who play soccer in America, they quit at the age of 7. And then another 50% drop off by the age of 10. So that's a huge, can you imagine you've got a business and you're losing 50% of your customer base every year?
Wow.
And so, you got to correlate these things. And I see these things. And I see also with my own children as well, because when my sons, both of them, crossed over that line into organized play here in Japan, they were technically more proficient than the rest of the kids. And what happens is there's a bias that manifests. So when a child crosses over and they're very comfortable and there's a gap that's created, which never say never, but is very, very difficult for the other children to catch. But what happens is that child who's so much further advanced, as soon as they step onto the field their first day, which is a traumatic experience for a 6-year-old, to be dropped off to go somewhere new where perhaps they don't know any other kids. But if they're operating from a foundation of being confident, there's so much that manifests. That child usually becomes the most popular kid on the team. Because think about it, when a coach says, okay, 2 to a ball, 3 to a ball, normally or many times, most of the kids gravitate towards the better kids, okay? And then more importantly, when a coach wants a child or a kid to demonstrate, they naturally pick on the best kid. So now you got a 6-year-old who's getting the opportunity at leadership at the age of 6. And that's a big deal, man. That's a huge, in the neuroscience world where I dabble in a little bit because I've got some of the top neuroscience guys in the world that I collaborate on. That's well-being, that's self-confidence, that's self-belief. And that at an early age can set the trajectory for a child in a positive direction that can't be compared to anything else. There's a lot of kids that feel inferior when they step onto a pitch or they go anywhere in life. They have low self-esteem. They have no self-belief. And so those are things that we have to consider that I never really kind of looked at as a professional coach until I started really dissecting and really immersing myself in development and studying other countries and studying the best players in the world and saying, okay, well, what do they got that others don't got? Why are we got certain countries in the world that are such hotbeds for football development? And it's because of the cultures, and it's because a lot of these kids are getting a tremendous head start above everybody else. And that's very, very difficult to catch up to that, So, I mean, I know that because I've spent so much time with literally hundreds of thousands of kids here in Japan. I used to be on what I used to do back started in the late 80s and went right through to the 90s and the 2000s. I was on the road every single weekend doing these massive events for Japanese kids. I'm talking massive events with, 500-600 kids show up to my events because of my media presence as well on TV. So I've seen a lot of players. I've seen a lot of football. I've seen a lot of kids. And also having run one of the biggest football school academy programs in the world here as well, where today in our schools, we've got over 25,000 kids in those programs. I've been able to see, so I've got a little bit of an advantage over most because I've really been on the front lines and I travel around the world. I'm looking behind you. You've got the Ajax logo there. I'm one of the few guys, if not maybe one of the only Americans that's actually been invited into Ajax to present my work. So I'm seeing what's happening and I'm connecting a lot of dots. Been invited to Dynamo Zagreb. And that culminated in me being asked to write 2 pages or a couple pages for the Croatian national curriculum. So these are things that, normally you wouldn't find yourself in, but the biggest really advantage that I have is that I've got a lot of experience of seeing what's out there. and also comparing it and integrating it into my practical experience that I have here. So I see that there's such a difference in a child that once they cross over that line into organized play, like my kids did, that even paired with the inexperienced coach, those kids develop. They develop. And I've seen many, many teams that have unbelievably, really super great coaches where kids don't develop. And then I've seen kids that go on to, play on professional teams and national teams that had really average or sub-average coaches as well. So that's really kind of the way that I look at the game. But I believe that the entry level, because there's 3 distinct levels in development. There's the entry level, there's the competitive level, and there's the elite level. And throughout the world, the majority of the focus goes on the elite level. It trickles down. It goes on the elite level, the competitive level, and the entry level is non-existent. Nobody really does anything. I guess they just think that, kids are just going to show up and they're going to start, obviously playing like Ronaldo or Messi, or in America, Christian Pulisic, right? But the reality is that we now, myself, I've spent decades working in the elite side, in the competitive side, and now the entry level. And there's absolutely as clear as the nose on the end of my face, the most important phase of development is the entry level. There's no doubt about it for me. And that's the part and the piece that most countries get wrong.
Let's say I'm the founder, I'm the director of my club, and I'm setting up our curriculum. I'm setting it up in America, okay? And I want to try to get it right with the parents being educated and properly developing the players. So in a culture where it's still growing and it's not the number one sport, you're able to develop players that can compete at the highest internationally. If I come up to you, what do you say the age group that we got to be willing to take players in, or age group that we say still too young, they still got to be free with no guidances yet, or Tom, do we take them in and create for that maybe 4-5 years old the free culture where we tell our coaches, hey, let him play, don't give any points yet, have it be like a street environment. Okay, as it goes now you start to plant seeds and guided discovery versus joysticking. What is it if I come up to you saying year to year, or say age ranges 4 to 8, 8 to 12, 12 to 16, 16 to 18 kind of contract, if it's universities, if it's contract, what is it in those phases that should be the primary attention in developing?
Yep. Well, the first step is trying to influence and facilitate something before they ever show up to your doorstep. Now, this is something that we're doing. Probably we will get to this eventually, but I work with the Houston Dynamo in the MLS. And we're putting a program together. So I'm very fortunate. I was given that blank piece of paper from the Houston Dynamo and said, how do we go? How do we start? What do we do? So it's basically trying to connect with kids pre-teen before they ever show up to your door. To be clear, I've never been an advocate of organized football training for 3-4-year-olds. I don't know. I don't call for that at all. What I'm saying is that the biggest role is the parents, and what a parent can do with their own child cannot be replicated out on a pitch with a strange coach at those early ages. So what you're trying to do is, again, that entry level, because what you're talking, as soon as they cross over the line into organized play, that's the competitive level. To me, that's almost too late now from what I see and what I know. So it's really going on. How do you do that? Well, you got to figure out, who do you hitch your wagons to? Those are early learning centers. Those are preschool. Those are kindergartens. Those are kids, families that you already have in your existing club that have siblings that are 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's where it all starts for me. And if you get that part right, a lot of these problems cease to become problems because you have you've got a much higher level child at the entry level. So that's when a coach can actually do what they were hired to do, and that's coach. And again, I can't emphasize that enough. When you see kids in those early ages at 6 or 7 that are really, really good, everybody believes that lightning struck in a bottle. Like, wow, look at this kid. He's the next Messi. No, the reason is because most people's expectations of what a 6-year-old can do or a 7-year-old can do is very low. So when they see a special kid, they think that that's like, the kid was born like that. But I've done so much research. I've studied. I've filmed documentaries or film about it. Messi, Ronaldo, Suarez, Iniesta, Modric, Pogba, Lewandowski, Cruz, Hazard. When you look at these players' stories, it's so easy to see where. But the problem is that everybody looks at, when they study players, they look at, well, when did he first show up to his first team, or when did he get recruited by Barcelona or some of these big clubs? No. When you look at these players that I just named, 2 common denominators jump out. One, they started playing around the home between the ages of 2 and 5, and the role that the fathers and sometimes the mothers played. That's it. And that's a tremendous head start. So getting back to your point is that what we're doing in Houston is we are connecting. We've connected with the schools. We've been embraced by the schools. We have a program that just kicked off in Houston with a couple of 100,000 children. These are kids that are in early learning centers, they're in preschool, they're in kindergarten. And what we do is we're giving the tools and the knowledge through education and through content basically to parents of those kids. And we're empowering those parents to be able to engage with their kids in a meaningful way. And you don't have to have played at a top level to be able to figure this out. It's very simple. So we created a whole content-based library. And the great news is, Shawn, it's free, bro. It doesn't cost a penny. The end user, it's just knowledge. And so if you look at how kids learn, like, for example, and I don't know, you look maybe a bit too young. Maybe you don't have any kids yet. I'm not sure or not. But I've got some kids, right? But usually what happens is that parents do everything they can to try to give their kids that head start, right? In education, especially. So they read to them at nighttime. The reason they're reading to them is because they're basically, kids are consuming the alphabet, the words, the sentence, the structure, the hearing. All of that is coming together at a very young age. So there's a commitment. Parents put 20, 30 minutes aside each night to read to their kids. Well, it's no different with football. So what we're doing in Houston is we're basically trying to encourage parents, okay, put 15 or 20 minutes aside each day or every other day. And this is what you should do with your kids. It all starts with ball mastery. Everybody believes, first of all, here's the biggest misconception of our sport. At entry level, everybody thinks it's a kicking game. So when you go out to a park in any place in the world, you'll find parents and kids just kicking the ball back and forth. Well, we try to discourage kicking. We try to discourage kicking, and we try to get more into this ball mastery, more into this, learning to control the ball. And the good thing about what our program also does is that it basically helps to develop the brain. Do you know that 90% of a child's brain is developed by the age of 5 or 6? That's a very small window. So we very rarely have opportunities to build the neural pathways between the feet and the brain. But through ball mastery, that builds those networks. And now we know from the neuroscience, okay, and this is really fascinating stuff, groundbreaking stuff, that what happens is that when a child is playing in around the home with their parent, well, that the home is considered a very safe, protective environment, away from ridicule, where they can try things, new things, and there's no pressure to succeed. But here's the gift, I call it, for parents, is a parent's understanding of their child's need for parental approval, for parental attention, for parental praise. And what that sets up is it creates a chemical electrical process in the body of a child, which is emotions. And when you create an emotionally charged environment, that's where deep learning and long-term memory takes place. So kids are literally uploading these technical skills into their brain, like a hard drive, to be used later in an automatic, unconscious way. And that's what people have to understand. And so we take parents through this, exactly what I'm talking about right now. We've created a content library that basically engages parents so that they understand. So the best part is that it's an engagement, and it gives the parents an opportunity to do something meaningful with their kids. And one of the biggest joys in life is being able to help your children to develop into something. So this is taking me maybe 5-10 minutes to explain to you. So this is the piece of the pie that's missing, that most parents don't know what development looks like. So we try to teach them, well, this is what development looks like, because they don't know. So what happens is that you wind up getting a child crosses over the line into organized play. They have their starting part is at 0. Now, do some kids develop? Yeah, sure they do, but a majority of them don't. A majority of kids who play in America, but not just America, I'm not trying to beat up on America. A majority of kids who play globally are technically poor. That's the reality of it. So the whole idea is to give these kids a much bigger opportunity and likelihood, stack the deck a little bit to ensure that these kids are going to have a good experience. Because when a kid shows up to a practice and they don't have a good experience, well, that equals lack of fun. So what we're saying is that when you get a kid who's technically competent from day one, a lot manifests, and the kid just obviously has more fun. That means if they have more fun, they want to go to practice more. If they practice more, they're going to become better. If they become better, they have more fun. It's continuous. And to try to build up and instill that intrinsic motivation is not easy to do, but you have a much better chance or opportunity to do it if you're starting from a different starting point and vantage. So to me, to answer the question is that's number one. That's number one. So imagine you've got 20 kids show up to your club at 6 years of age, and all of them are technically proficient already. Then you can then and only then, that whole mantra of just let them play, that actually works. But it doesn't work when you got a bunch of 26-year-olds that have absolutely no technical competency, and you roll the ball out and say, okay, just let them play. Because then you got 20 kids or 10 kids just chasing a ball because they have no idea. The big difference when I studied different cultures around the world is that when I was studying players, and I've studied lots of them from many different generations, but one in particular was Neymar, who's a technical genius, right? I heard a saying from an old mentor coach of mine. He said the Brazilians are drunken with skill. That's how good they are. It's freedom with no responsibility. So when you look at Neymar, I was reading an article about his dad. It was an interview, and his dad said this. He said, in Brazil, people don't realize kids don't fall in love with football. They fall in love with the ball. They fall in love with the ball first, and that in turn leads to falling in love with football. So I can't help but compare that in America or in many other countries in the world, we try to force the kids to fall in love with football, and the ball gets in the way. And if you can understand that simple little premise, that ball is the center, you want the kid to fall in love with the ball, that leads to falling in love with the game instead of reverse, you're halfway there to solving the development problem. And that's where you get, a lot of criticism. Coaches, they do drills, they do this. It's very organized. It's too organized. It's very structured. Yeah, because you've got a bunch of little kids that show up that can't walk and chew gum at the same time. So, of course, people are tearing their hair out. And then when they get into the games, and the parents, who, as we know in America, pay to play model, it's very expensive to play. And then they see their kid, let's be honest, I hate to say this, but they just can't do anything. And they're viewed as, oh my goodness, my kid can't do anything at all. Well, that's when you get the crazy parents that are screaming out of frustration because they can't believe they see their kid, who they think, pretty athletic kid because mommy and daddy played sports. And why can't my kid play soccer? And so, there's just a whole, there's a bias that manifests. And once that snowball starts to roll down the hill, it's pretty hard to push it back up. So That's what I say to all organizations, and I consult with countries, federations, confederations, professional clubs, amateur, and you have to recognize that the entry level is the most important. And this is new for the Houston Dynamo. Professional clubs don't get involved in the entry level, but they do now, and they see it, and they see the opportunity to be able to literally develop hotbeds of development throughout the Houston area. And that's what we're doing right now.
Tom, that's fantastic. And it's funny how you brought up Houston Dynamo. Actually, we interviewed Omid Namazi, the assistant coach with Houston Dynamo currently as well. And
yeah, great. I just spent some time with him when I was there in January. Great guy.
Great guy. And it's funny, we were talking about development. He's close friends with the head coach, Tab Ramos, how they were talking about baby football in Uruguay, how it's chaotic culture about winning and development. Like his perspective is, even though development's key in that young, you got to balance it out with some winning to have that kind of incorporated in. One of the players we brought up, I don't know if you're aware, he's a Persian player. His name is Arat Hosseini, 13-year-old kid. Social media, he's blown up every aspect of it. His dad has a unique approach. We don't know if it's going to be successful long term, but I wanted to kind of have you seen the individual?
I might have. The name sounds familiar, but I'm familiar with some great Persian players. We've got a kid down in Australia as well, Arzani, I think his name is. And I mean, I was always a big fan of Ali Daei because I mean, Iran is in the same group as Japan. So AFC, I've seen lots of Persian football. And I got a buddy of mine, Dan Gaspar, who was the goalkeeper coach and the assistant coach of the Iranian national team. So they develop fantastic, technically skilled players and really smart players as well.
No, and I want to get your approach with this one. Arat Hosseini, his dad started training him, I believe, like from 1 year old, 2 years old, and it wasn't soccer football at the beginning. It was climbing walls. I mean, this kid, I mean, if you haven't seen him, he does they had like elastic bands where he's doing flips and he's handstanding, he's doing push-ups.
Now that you're mentioning it, I recall seeing it. Yes, I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, and then now he's doing fantastic ball work. And it was funny how you said from the 5 to 6 years old, and the dad praises him a lot. That's why I wanted to kind of get into our next situation of development. Game versus practice. Versus practice. And as a parent, I mean, I know in America, this is a tug of war you have with parents and coaches. It's game driven. They want tournaments. They want to pay for 2-day tournaments that is 5 games in 2 days. And, usually if you look at it from a theoretical perspective of there's one ball in a game, X amount of players, the amount of touches you're getting in a game compared to what you would at a 1-to-1 ratio. I wanted to know, is it a balance or is it let's just talk about grassroots. Let's be specific, grassroots. Is it a time that we should emphasize training first and then the game?
Yeah. I think it's a balance between it, and it also depends upon what the level of play is. Like I said, if you've got kids that are technically really proficient, then that just let them play amount of games, it seems to work. But I've seen way too many times kids that are technically poor, and man, you can put them in games every single day for 100 years, and it seems like a lot of them don't develop. And I've seen that firsthand with my own kids. So, for example, I can give you real life examples, right? I'm not just going to talk about it. I'm going to tell you what my experience is. So in Japan here, they overtrain. They train too much. They train and this is from 6 to 12 years of age. Minimum, they train 4 times a week, okay? My sons, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. Mm-hmm. They train 2.5 to 3 hours a training session. That's huge.
Wow.
And on any given year, they'll play on average about 100 games a year. Okay.
What's the age? What's this age range that we're talking about?
6 to 12. 6 to 12.
Oh, wow.
12. Okay. So Now, I've seen firsthand with my own boys' team. Now, my boys joined. Now, here, it's been very interesting because this is unusual too, but my son's teams, from first grade to sixth grade, they had the exact same coach for 6 years. Okay. Now, that coach had never coached or really played soccer or football. He's a rugby player, but he volunteered to coach the team because his daughter was on my son's team. Okay. 6 or 7 girls on that team, about 20 players in total. And I saw from day one, my son shows up to that practice and they played mostly games. They did some training, but not a lot of technical training. But trust me, they play a lot of small-sided games, and they play a lot of games on the weekends. They play a lot of tournaments as well. Well, I'll tell you, fast forward after that 6 years, and my son was the best player from the first day and the best player after he left elementary school. There were 2 or 3 other kids that were pretty good, reasonably good when they started. And then I found out later that their fathers were players. And then all the rest were beginners. And that's exactly how it turned out. And now you got to remember, they're training the exact same amount of hours. They're doing the exact same training as the other kids, and they've got the same coach. So I find you'd think almost inconceivable that you fast forward 6 years, best kid's my kid, the best 2-3 kids are the kids that started out. And I've seen kids that literally you almost think it's inconceivable, but it just didn't develop. Just didn't develop. Looked so uncomfortable, the ball at their feet. So I've seen that just kind of let him play. So what I'm getting at is that for me, it comes down to that entry level of what happens at the very, very beginning of a kid's start at those young ages of 5, 6, and 7. Now, never say never. I'm not saying that all kids are like this, but a majority of them are like that. And then you'll see the correlate that after that team too, a majority or almost all of the players that didn't develop well, that they all quit. They don't play anymore. They don't play anymore. So I've seen that, and so here in Japan, the good thing is that we have lots of hotbeds where kids do develop really, really well technically. And then it's just really amount of how much time they play, how many games they play. Because I'm telling you, the coaching is not that high level here. But yet I've got players, both on the men's and the women's side, that I've trained from the entry level, and I've seen them go on to play in the World Cup tournaments. I've done the same thing with coaches. My former assistant, who used to do events with me in Japan, is currently the head coach of the Japan women's national team. She was the head coach of the under-17 World Cup team that won the World Cup in Costa Rica. So I've seen her. I've seen the trajectory. I've seen her as a player. I've seen her work without any coaching credentials. I've seen her, and I've even mentored her on training, on technical training. So I've seen the trajectory. And then I've seen her go on to win a World Cup tournament in Costa Rica, where the Japan national team scored 23 goals and allowed 1. And this is a coach that had little to zero experience, and she went to coach his team. Now, not to degrade her ability, but one of the reasons is because at the very young ages, the better technically the players are, the less coaching you need. The less coaching you need. Now, the older you get, and especially on the men's side, the older you get, it's pretty assumed, the technical ability is assumed to be at a certain level, but then it comes into coaching systems, formations, tactics. And those systems, formations, and tactics are dependent upon the quality of the players that you put into there. So that's why, for me, it all comes down to that technical part of getting it right. So it's a long kind of answer to your question, but the question was, that whole practice, practice. How does that go? So the way that I see it is that if you can get players that are, so look at the Belgium model. I've been very fortunate to be around the top Belgium coaches in the world. Chris van der Hagen, head of coaches education. We've both been on courses together where we're both instructors. Okay. So I spent time with him. I've seen all of his presentations, everything. The reason the Belgians are so good, and Chris van der Hagen starts off his presentation with one slide. You know what it is? FIFA rankings. because for 3 years they've been the number one ranked country in the world. How can that be possible with only 11 million people? And this is what Chris says. Chris says, he starts his presentation, he says the rest of the world should be ashamed of themselves. Yeah, because how can a country like this? Now, what happened was they figured out the entry level was extremely important. So what they did was they went around and literally single-handedly, one guy went around and did over close to 3,000 presentations going around the country trying to convince people that they should go with these little 1-versus-1 kind of training sessions with goalkeepers on these mini pitches at the ages of 5 and 6. And they convinced the whole country to go with this. So they did something that's so extraordinary. And so what I say is, and I recommend this, I convinced the head of grassroots football development at the Hong Kong FA, who's a Brit, to go with this. And at first you get resistance. But if you can seed those younger age groups at 5 and 6, and then when they come to, you set up training sessions where literally all they do is play small-sided games, because at that age, kids want only two things. They want a ball at their feet to dribble, and they want to score goals. That's it. That's it. So give that to them. That's what they love to do. And apparently it seems to be working. Now, of course, the Belgians are doing they're doing many other things, but that's their first line. That's the first thing. So if you want to play like the best, well, you might want to see, and the problem is that coaches are possessed with more training. I've got to study more. I've got to follow the study, Pep Guardiola or Jose Mourinho or Sir Alex Ferguson or Arsene Wenger or Bessila or all of these top coaches. And that's important. I'm not saying coaches' education isn't important, but come on, people. The problem is that the quality of the players, there's a limit to what you can do with these players. And I see that you can hire and fire the best coaches in the world. We get them in Asia all the time, man. We've got coaches that are on $10-15 million a year in China. Marcelo Lippi. Marcelo Lippi's finished in China, and over the last several years, he's made over 100 million euro and couldn't qualify the Chinese national team for anything, nothing. So that's not disrespect to Marcelo Lippi, because he's good at that elite side. But when it comes to, taking a less developed country and getting them into these world, there's no secret sauce for getting a team into the World Cup. We did a study and we saw that since 1994 out here in AFC, our confederation, no team is qualified for the World Cup that doesn't first qualify for an under-17 World Cup or an under-20 World Cup. So if you're a coach and you're hired and you're going to one of these, countries that's not a traditional football country, and you think that you're going to automatically somehow through your coaching experience qualify one of these countries that's never played for a World Cup into the World Cup, history is not on your side, I'm sorry to say. So unless you put that attention at those younger age groups, and that's where the problem is, because a majority of countries trying to develop players, they're throwing all the money at the top end. And the entry level is where, and it's like, I say, and in my presentation, I have a slide of Mickey Mouse who's opening this door. He keeps opening the door because he's in the wrong door. And I tell people it's like almost being on this endless treadmill that goes nowhere, because countries, they're spending millions of dollars to try to unlock that mystery on development. And I say, people, it's right there. You don't have to go across the ocean and hold the hand of the foreign expert. Get the entry level right. And I can't speak enough about how important that is. And that's the missing ingredient that many countries, they get it wrong.
No, I mean, it's so simple, Tom, but it's sometimes the simple things is the ones that we miss dearly in anything we do in any field. A lot of stuff you spoke about kind of is a perfect transition into my next question. And one of the main topics of this platform as well, it's the mindset. I think in anything you become successful in life, it's the mindset behind it. And I think you touched on base with, you've worked with elite, one of the most elite coaches, as well as you've been around the elite players as well. And I want to dissect not only players, coaches as well, people within our game. Okay. What is the mindset especially for our viewers that are listening, to be there, to be in those situations, to be tweaked that way? What are the characteristics, if it's from 1 to 5 or 1 through 10, that, these are key ingredients to have to be at the highest level within whichever continent it is, whichever country it is. And you even said there are some elite, more elite coaches in the US than Japan, but they're missing the mindset to get themselves more exposed, say in Europe, in this.
Yeah.
I just want to kind of dissect the mindset of coaches at the highest, players at the highest. What is that they have that got them to where they are?
Yeah, well, I think that's why it's important when you roll it back again and ensuring that players get the technical component right, because when you get the technical component right, that empowers you. That empowers you because when you have good technical ability, you basically play with a lot of confidence. And that's instilled from an early age. And obviously, the more confidence you have in any sport, the less pressure that you play in. So that's the biggest challenge, is ensuring, first of all, the kids are technically proficient. When you look at and read like a lot of biography, I often reference this, but Pep Guardiola was asked a question. He said, when you're looking for a player to recruit them, what is the number? What are you looking for? He says, that's easy. Whether it's a defender, whether it's a midfielder, forward, I'm looking at their technical ability, their ability to beat players 1 versus 1, because I can always teach the passing. I can always teach the combination systems. So that's a given. So what I find is that when you get those young kids that are really good technically, just think of it. You get a player like a Messi, Ronaldo, Suarez, those really, really top players. When they get the ball at their feet, you know what the attitude is? Come and get it. Try to come and get the ball from me. And they're not worried so much about the defender in front of them. They're looking already at the number 2 or the number 3 defender. So that's empowerment, man. These guys are learning to read. They're learning to understand space, of course, because they're comfortable with the ball at their feet. So that's a mindset that's very difficult to teach if you don't have those technical skills, first of all, to be able to take players on, right? So I see that, and I see that in young players. I see the ones that, for example, that's the one thing about when you compare Asian countries to Western countries, and let's say America, Japan in particular, is that Americans from a very, very young age are kind of taught that it's kind of all about me, right? The individual. That's why you get this kind of, this stereotype of people who bash America because most American kids think America #1, we're the best country in the world, because that's our culture. That's our mentality, right? Whereas here in Japan, it's like kind of, I'm not worthy. It's that Buddhist kind of belief that you're never reaching your full potential. You're never reaching your destiny. It's the journey along the road that's teaching you everything, right? And there's something nice about that as well. But that's also one of the Achilles heels here in Japan as well, is that belief, is that when they line up against Brazil in a World Cup tournament or in any kind of play, or a team that they respect, there is an inferior belief that the wheels could fall off, right? Whereas in America, when they play against any top country, they actually go into that game believing that they can beat them. And even if they're 15 minutes left and they're behind 1-0 or 2-0 or 2-1, they actually believe that they can win that game, because that's that American fighting spirit, right? That we will overcome. We can beat anybody. Nobody's better than we are. And, I just think that, that does come down to a lot of, to a couple of things. Are the kids, do they have the tools in their toolbox to be able to be competent, first of all, on what they can do? But then I think that has a lot to do with coaching, has a lot to do with culture, has a lot to do with history. So, for example, when our Japanese women won the World Cup in 2011, I don't think it's a fluke that within a 7-year window, a country with only 50,000 girls that are registered to play, within a 7-year window, we won all 3 FIFA World Cup tournaments. That's a
Wow.
belief. That's a belief. Now, we didn't win the 2011 World Cup senior and then the 20s and the 17s. No, it went from the seniors 2011, and then the juniors won the 2017, which basically empowered and inspired and motivated the under 20s as well. So it's interesting, but imagine you've won all three FIFA World Cup tournaments in a space of 7 years. So to me, that a lot of it also has to do with the belief, the history. We can do it because our elders did it. And that has a lot to do with it. It has a lot to do with tradition. It has a lot to do with culture. It has a lot to do with history. It has a lot to do with belief. That's why you get a country or a club like behind you, Ajax, that has, certain core values that they try to instill in their players through the different generations. The big thing about Ajax is, and I've been very lucky and fortunate and honored to be around some of these top guys from Ajax and work with them, is that a lot of people don't realize Ajax's whole mantra is that the player comes first. It's a player-centric approach. And the team is the tool to developing the player, the individual player. So their whole mantra is, and I've seen their presentations because I've presented alongside some of these guys from Ajax, is their whole goal in life and their dream, and their goal more, and the dream comes true more often than not, is to field a team of 11 players that come from within that Ajax academy and win as much silverware as possible. And they do it. And they smash expectations all the time. And the biggest thing is when they got paired into the knockout round with Real Madrid, and they fielded a team of 11 players, and those starting 11, and I believe also even the players on the bench, their entire salary budget for that whole entire team was smaller than Gareth Bale's for 1 year. So again, the mindset again, I think it's the DNA, like a lot of these countries try to figure out, well, what's our DNA? What's our style of play? What's our, we've got to get the juniors and they have to play exactly through to the first team. We have to attack. We got to play a 4-3-3. We're going to play the same. So countries and clubs are trying to figure that out. Some do it better than others do it. Some don't. But I think that kind of mentality that, trying to instill a growth mindset for kids. And that's the part here in Japan that's very, very nice because players are very coachable here. Japanese and Buddhist kind of culture is that learning and teaching and the role of the sensei, which is the word for a teacher. And then they have words for even experts. And so that's a very nice side of Japanese culture. But, that's kind of, sorry, I give long-winded answers to short questions.
No.
It's just my experiences that I see, and one of the problems with football development is that we have probably a few too many, what I call these armchair kind of coaches that don't have a lot of experience, and they talk about it. But I've been very fortunate because, again, I've been in the trenches for a couple of decades now, and I've actually seen players from entry level all the way up through to tournaments. I work with players that are 8, 9 years old that go on to win the Women's World Cup tournament, and then becomes the captain of the national team, and goes to London and wins a silver medal in the Olympics as well. So I've seen that trajectory. I've seen what they do. I see their life. I see what kind of training they do. I see the personality. I see the quality of coaching that they have or haven't had. So I'm able to connect different dots that some people aren't be able to connect. I'm just fortunate because I've been able to work with such a player pool that I've seen at all the different levels. And so, you get a different insight to it.
No, Tom, I mean, when you even elaborate on any of these questions, it's actually just pure knowledge. Your experiences is so delightful and refreshing to hear as well. One of my basically second to last question, this is kind of the setup before we close it out with our final question.
Sure.
Because I'm in the same way. I love to do a lot of research on that development part and just look at the the psychology behind it. Why did that player become who he is? One of my favorite players, and even what my club, the MAGIA Football Academy, is kind of like the street created player. Means
Yep.
when I study a player like Ronaldinho, like the Neymar, like the Maradona, like the Pele, and I'm talking about number 10s, the natural number 10s, the creative number 10s, the street number 10s, the one that when he scores a hand of God, he looks at it as cheeky, that you just pulled a robbery on someone and you got away with it. And that's
Yep.
taught in the street. And that's actually, when you look at it from a player that's been raised in the street, you're like, dude, that was clever, that was
Yep.
smart, that was cheeky. And my take is when you evaluate all of those players, and I know it's different on the women's game, but especially if we talk about the men's game, that number 10, my point of view, it cannot be created only on the streets. Means purely those people, when you look at the history behind it, is family, it's poor, they come from the slums, they're hungry. That means they are literally their family's meal ticket to
Yep.
get them out. And there's a hunger behind that I don't feel you can coach. You can't create that environment. I want to kind of throw it back on you is, let's say someone's not blessed like that. Someone was blessed in life, actually blessed. They were given a household, but they have potentials. Can we create that? Like, I'm talking about the raw number 10s environment to create that hunger, that compassion, but that creativeness where it's hard for a coach to do if it's not embedded from you can say culture, environment.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I've thought a lot about this. What you're talking about is that there's two words that conjure up what you're talking about. Players are either inspired, it's either inspiration or desperation. Normally, when you look at athletes overall, they're either incredibly inspired or they're desperate to get out of their situation. Now, the thing with South American players or these Latin players is they got them both. They got them both. They've got inspiration because the number of great players and the generations are such that they just have endless amounts. If you're talking Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, all of these countries, Spain, France, all of them, right? But then it's the inspiration, it's the desperation. That is one of the problems that we have in a country like Japan. Because Japan is probably the strongest middle-class country on planet Earth. Everybody's doing pretty good here. You don't find a lot of poverty. You got 97% literacy in this country. And so that's the part. Now, if you go a little bit deeper and you figure out also that the top coaches in the world that are at the top clubs or national teams in the world, what are they good at? What they're good at is motivating, inspiring. They're literally like psychologists. You get a guy like Sir Alex Ferguson that's like at the top of his game, won God knows who knows how much silverware, probably the tops in the world. But when you look at these guys, and I've been lucky, I've been around these guys, and I've seen them, I've studied them. They're psychologists, they're fathers, they're teachers, they're big brothers, they're mentors. They're a host of different things. And when you look at, for example, Arsene Wenger, who I've met because he was here in Japan, but Arsene Wenger, and I think I read this somewhere, Arsene Wenger, when he goes out and to a training session in Arsenal, he makes it a point to have a conversation with every single player, every training session. I can tell you here in Japan that there's training sessions, because when I played even at Hitachi, which was before the J-League, there's training sessions where the coach never has a conversation with any of the players or many of the players. Or they've never really had a deep conversation with just about any of the younger players. So again, it comes down to culture, right? Here, kids, and for the most part, they're not desperate to play football. There are some, and we do have some little hotbeds of development in Japan here. There are some areas, and if you study them, there could be a case to be made that the economy is a little bit weaker in certain areas. But for the most part, when we're talking about inspiration and desperation, that really conjures up more of those really kind of poor nations where kids, yeah, they see it as a way of getting at it and jumping up the socioeconomic ladder. They see, you know, what's the first thing that a lot of these young players do when they sign their big contracts, right? They buy a car for mom and dad, or they build a house for mom and dad or grandma or grandpa. They use it in a very positive way. They also seem to be players who are quite religious in their faith as well. So they've got a belief system as well. So yeah, there's no doubt about it that plays a huge role. And that's why you get the image of the boxer too, that comes from the really poor, desperate kind of family background, because he's fighting, metaphorically, he's fighting his way out of his situation, right? I think that plays a big role. I think that plays a very big role. And I think that, you know, that's some of that has to do with nature as well. Or not nature so much, but circumstances, right? That's a better word. Circumstances of being born in a certain country. But I think there's a limit to, you know, how much that can actually be maybe taught. But I think that it's very, very important. And I think that in America, you tend to see too, because in America is a country that has a huge gap between socioeconomics, right? You've got very poor kids. And then in America, and that's probably the biggest criticism that we get in America, is that, let's be honest, soccer is a rich kid sport, right? The rich kids play. It's suburban kids. It's paid to play. The best, more creative kids don't get to play. So yeah, it's a very hotly debated thing. But I would say also, though, where you could kind of, you know, maybe turn that upside down is when you look at some of these countries, like a country like Iceland. It's got a couple of 100,000 people population, but here they're punching above their weight, right? So I think that countries have to become creative. You know, I've got a really good friend of mine, Romeo Jozak. He's a former technical director of Croatia, and also Dynamo Zagreb. Worked there. He worked with Luka Modric when he was a teenager. And, you know, what I learned from Romeo is that countries have to do what they can do within the resources. They don't have a big talent. They don't have a big player pool of players in Croatia. So they have to do things much better than some other countries do. And I think that's the same way with a country like Uruguay, 3-4 million population, Switzerland, Belgium, you know, and so you have to figure these things out. But, you know, my problem is I run off in so many different other directions. But I agree with you that that's important. But I think that the role of the coach to be able to try to, and again, you know, there's so many different layers of it. Are we talking about the elite? Are we talking about national team World Cup players? Are we talking about Champions League? Are we talking about, you know, amateurs? Are we talking about kids? But I think, you know, coaching does make a difference, but it makes a difference when you can get in and keep coming back. And it's all about the technical part for me.
Can the inspiration, desperation be manipulated into home?
Yeah, maybe it can, but I think that, you know, you can't really replicate a dad who's lost his job or who's doing 3 or 4 jobs just to put bread on the table, right? Versus the father or the kid who grows up in, you know, the multi-million-dollar house with the swimming pool, who's, you know, bought a, you know, who's bought a BMW for his 16th birthday because he can drive now, you know? I mean, I'm being a little bit exaggerated, but this is what really happens, right? I mean, you know, what happens in America, I don't know if it's so much now, but I remember my buddies telling me they'd show up, you know, the coach is driving in the beat-up Volkswagen, and then the kid would be driving up in the Mercedes or the Corvette or the BMW, right? So, yeah, but that inspiration, desperation, I don't know if that can be manipulated too much. And I think that's one of the reasons why also you look at that it's the same serial repeat winners all the time, man. It's the same countries. And it's the same countries that have that almost endless assembly line of development that develop so many great players because they're hungry. You know, they're hungry. to be a player, but they're also inspired because their heroes are players as well.
No.
So that's like a lethal cocktail for development.
No, it's fantastic. I love that inspiration, desperation that goes hand in hand into, and I totally agree with that. It's been so great, Tom. My last question is always a fun one because it kind of gives us a window's eye within your perspective of the game. And obviously, you have a huge background in football, soccer. So I'm assuming it's going to go around there, but I want to open it up that it can go in any sports. So I want to get into your favorite player of all time, your favorite team of all time, and then elaborate how did that come upon?
Man, that is a really, really, really tough question. And I don't, man, you know, I've been around I'm an old guy, man. I'm 59 years old. So
you look good.
Yeah, thanks, man. But I'm trying to think of, because I don't really have one particular favorite team, but I've got favorite teams during certain eras. So
you can pick that. You can pick that.
So I'd have to say, okay, the team that probably made the biggest impact on me.
Yes.
Okay, which may be inspired. It's got to be the New York Cosmos, because I was growing up. I'm from New York. Okay, I used to go to games. This was back in the 70s, where there was a bit of the first kind of ever football or soccer boom in America was with the North American Soccer League. And, you know, we've got Pele playing there. We've got Beckenbauer playing there. We've got this guy, Chinaglia, Italian player. We had at the time who was billed as one of probably the best American players, Ricky Davis was there. Shep Messing in the goal. I can't, you know, that's the team that I can recall off names, and I can call off and I can recollect and have memories of. Literally, I was born in the Bronx in New York City, but I lived upstate New York from the age of 10 and above. And I remember we would actually go around to neighbors' homes that had a better antenna on the ceiling, on the roof, and go and turn the antenna so that it would be able to get the signal for the game in New York City. So, you know, that's a big impact, right? Because I'm just still a kid, you know, 14, 15 years old then. And so that was probably, you know, my biggest team that I followed. Now, fast forward, I mean, I follow a lot of different teams, and a lot of different players. And back in that generation, it was Pele, it was Franz Beckenbauer, it was Johan Cruyff, George Best. I got to see these guys play because they played in America. And these are like the all-time best of the best, right? And a long story short, maybe on a next interview, I actually got to meet a lot of these guys, because when they had a Legends game here one time in Japan, all these guys came over, and I got asked to actually chaperone these guys and take them out. And I wind up going to the Hard Rock Cafe and meeting George Best, Eusebio, Nene Cubillas, who I knew anyway before that, Kevin Keegan, Johnny Rep, Ruud Krol. These are like the legends that I grew up watching when I was a kid. And here I Alberto Tarantini, Mario Kempes. Actually met these guys and befriended some of them, right? But if you look at who's the best player in the world, for me, to this day now, I mean, for me, it's got to be Lionel Messi, man. I mean, the guy's he's a freak, and I don't use that word in a disparaging way. But, you know, and I've always been a Ronaldo fan. You know, there's that whole controversy, who's better, this and that. They're completely different types of players, first of all. Completely different types of players. But, man, I can only think that if I was playing on a team, man, what it would be like to play on a team like Messi, with Messi on it, or play against Messi. I mean, the guy is just unbelievable. He's just everything. I don't see any weak point in his game. He can do it all. So that's my answer. I guess my all-time best player would be Messi, and my favorite team would have been the New York Cosmos when I was a kid.
I don't know how the Argentines feel about that with him and Maradona.
Well, Maradona, and I got to meet Maradona here in Japan as well. Huge fan of his as well. And if I hadn't picked Messi, I would have picked Maradona. But again, different types of players.
Yep.
Man, bro, I still to this day, every time I see a highlight video of Messi, I can't stop watching it. The guy is just unbelievable. And Maradona had a lot of those kind of moments, but not as many as Messi. I mean, the guy is just a freak when he's got the ball at his feet.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I think he's doing against better defenders. But the challenge is when I'm getting as older and you're looking at it from perspective, it's kind of like you look at Cruyff, you look at Maradona. If you gave him the sports performance coaches, nutritionists, today's era, every player, I guarantee it's gonna be tough to be better than Messi, but probably maybe not in my lifetime or even yours going down. But um, if when you look at the game played today, then that time it's evolving so much, so much people that are knowledgeable. Like, I mean, imagine the coaches you had as a player to now the coaches that are today developing players. I mean, I think that's the ingredient that goes into perspective too. But yeah, Messi, there's some things in his game you cannot coach. You cannot coach.
I would say the closest player to Messi would be George Best. He was another freak. And, I think that the great thing about the sport is that we've had many great players in all the different generations. There's been so many, whether it's a Maradona at the time or it was, Gerd Mueller back in the days or there's just so many players, but George Best too, he stands out. I mean, he's a guy that could beat, 7 or 8 players and look effortless, effortless and just beauty, so yeah, that's my take on it.
No, I mean, it's a hard one to debate. I think Messi has done it. And the thing that's impressive is usually when you get a natural player like that, he has a balance of, he's been doing it for a decade. I mean, 10 years. I mean, that's as special as he is to do it for this long. It's another level too, and another amount of respect to his work ethic behind it. Because you do, as you get older, you do have to make a lot of sacrifices in elongating it. But again, Tom, I truly appreciate it. It has been fantastic dialogue, and we've gained so much insightful wisdom from this. Truly appreciate it. And I want to kind of turn it to you to close us out with anything you have going, anything that you want our viewers to know about that could be opportunities, if it's for coaches, if it's for parents, if it's for players to look up and look into to become better within our game.
Yeah. Well, again, there's so many different levels of the game. I've been very fortunate because I've worked in most of those levels. And I think that, first of all, as a coach and trying to mentor, and I do mentor a lot of young coaches, and I always have time for people because people have always been very kind to me. I've been very fortunate to have some great mentors in coaching for myself. So I insist on hoping that coaches give back to other coaches as well. But it is really, you hear this often, but this growth mindset, you never really learn everything. I mean, I just saw an article the other day, Pep Guardiola just hired a new assistant coach from South America. And one of the things he said is, he says, I don't know everything. I need to be better. There's something missing at Man City. I need to look at something differently. So he hired another coach who I think is older than him, which is unusual for a senior guy to hire an older guy, right? I forget who it is, but so I would say, never stop learning, but never also think that there's one way of doing things. The old saying is there's many roads that lead to Rome. And so there's many different ways of doing it. Don't believe that my way is the only way. Don't believe everything that you hear. Challenge people. Don't, challenge the status quo. Try to learn and adapt it. Because my good friend Anson Dorrance, who's the winningest coach like in the history of not just soccer, but in like all collegiate sports in University of North Carolina, women's team, 22 times national champion and World Cup champion as well, head coach. Being a good coach is really kind of going and taking ideas and best practices from everybody and adapting them. So never stop learning. If people are interested more in what I'm doing in this whole soccer starts at home, if you don't mind, you can go to HoustonDynamo.com/soccer starts at home, and there's a whole free content there. Everything that I could possibly talk to you about is really almost rolled up into that platform, and it's free. So you can go on there and you can find out more about, how to put a program in place. There's free downloads of content. There's an ebook that's free there. So, I think that we just have to pay more attention to the entry level of what's happening to make sure that kids have a good experience when they start, because as football or soccer people, we have to do a much better job of bringing kids into our sports because of lots of distractions for kids, tablets and things. So that's really kind of my parting thing. And I can easily be accessible. I'm on social media as well, networks, anytime anybody. I'm almost probably too accessible. My office tells me sometimes, because anytime someone sends me something, a message, I'm probably 99.9% going to return an answer. So it's been a pleasure working with you and having this discussion. So thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak to, the people who are following your good work.
I appreciate it, Tom, and we appreciate you. It was fantastic, and we are looking forward to hopefully having you in the future as well, discussing different topics, different debate. Again, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks a lot.